Hello and welcome to Closer Walk Catholic Communications. I'm Father Bai, your host, and we're glad that you can join us. Today I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'm not following the liturgical calendar, and I'm not doing it for a reason, because there's something that I think that underlies a lot of the things that we talk about, and I think it needs to be put together, and hopefully one concise and consistent presentation that hopefully you'll understand. And it deals with the dignity of the human person, and where the dignity of the human person has declined to. And where did it start? And somewhat frighteningly, where will it end? Got a couple little notes that I will refer to during the course of this, but I want to go back to the 1960s when there was a population growth. We're part of the baby boomers, and everyone was going through this ZPG, zero population growth, and this is going to happen and that's going to happen, and so we need to be aware that we're going to overpopulate the earth, we're going to use all of our resources, we're going to starve ourselves to death and everything like that. That was part of it. Well, in 1967, now St. Paul VI, who was Pope at the time, had promulgated Humanae Vitae. Humanae Vitae was an absolutely fantastic document that talked about the dignity and the sanctity of all human life. And from the moment of conception to the moment of death, that we are to be afforded that dignity and that respect. And it dealt with a lot of issues and tried to present the church's consistency on maintaining and protecting the dignity of human life. Now, I'm not a priest who has a specialty in biomedical ethics or anything like that, but the idea of all these things that now that we're doing, either to conceive or to prevent conception, and the morality of that. Well, unfortunately, as so oftentimes happens with Vatican documents, no one really paid attention to the document. They took a slice out of it and they reacted to it. And the slice that they took out of that was the whole question of artificial contraception. And they always said the church is opposed to birth control. That if you're Catholic, everybody's supposed to fill up a minivan full of kids, okay? The old woman living in the shoe. Not the case. It's never been the case. When my parents were a young couple, the church taught rhythm, the rhythm method. Now, that's probably the reason why I'm the fourth of 5 children, but the reality is the fact that the church taught that you could responsibly be married and be loving and still limit the number of births, whether it's successful or not, meant that the idea of contraception was not opposed to church teaching. The method of artificial contraception became very offensive to the church's teaching. Nowadays, we have, through the Paul VI Institute in Omaha, Nebraska, a wonderful, wonderful teaching about nanotechnology and what they called natural family planning, NFP. And it's a wonderful science that helps couples, according to the law's teaching, the church's teaching, plan their families. But I'm going past that. When the Humanae Vitae encyclical was released, and the response to it was, we don't need to listen to a whole bunch of Italians in Rome. What happened was, in my estimation, as humble and as probably correct as it is, but anyway, that was the first time in my awareness that people looked at the teaching of the church and said, you can't tell us what to do. We can do what we want to do. Remember, I was raised in a Catholic family in the 50s, and we looked to the priests and the nuns in the church to make our decisions and ask permissions. But we started ignoring the church. That the teaching of the authority of the church was disagreed with via artificial contraception. And because of that, once you get one foot in the door, if I don't have to listen to this, who says I have to listen to that? And so consequently, a lot of the teachings of the church, of the teaching authority of the church, became highly suspect and highly dubious. And, I dare to say the recent scourge that we've gone through with this sexual misconduct on the part of members of the clergy has not done anything to enforce our credibility as a teaching authority of the church. Nonetheless, that artificial contraception question became a problem. When it was promulgated and problems arose, Pope Paul VI at the time made a statement, and he prophesied about 4 different things that were to happen if the faithful, in good conscience, would not assent to the teachings of the church in regards to artificial contraception. And he says this, that it would lead to infidelity and a moral decline in our society. Now, for those of you who were of age at that point in time, when the big birth control question was the issue, we thought, God, this is a miracle drug. Isn't it wonderful? We don't have to worry about our intimacy. We can use this and not have to deprive ourselves or deny ourselves of our natural instincts. And of course, our marriage will be so much stronger because we're able to be free to be intimate at will and at random. Well, when that happened, and all of a sudden, there was no sacrifice that we had to make for one another, out of love for one another, and then there were no consequences for sexual activity. You didn't have to worry about anything. That had been taken care of by a pill. Look what happened to the sanctity and the dignity of marriage. Look at the number of increased divorces and the lack of stability in marriage and family life since 1967. Very few people were divorced prior to 1967. After 1967, that number has skyrocketed to it's currently about 67% of all first marriages end in divorce. Then a moral decline. We're talking about a moral decline. Oh, moral decline about things that we consider moral or things that we consider, sexually appropriate or in teaching with God's law. I mean, do you understand during that time that on our television shows, they wouldn't let a woman wear pants? They wouldn't let a married couple sleep in a double bed, and they were scared to have a TV person on air being pregnant. Now, was that a little bit over it? Yeah, I think so. But look at where we've come. Look at where we've come when we now have advertisements that appear at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when our children are watching cartoons after school, and they're advertising vaginal lubricants and how happy we'll all be if we use this particular product. Thank you. But I don't think that's what I want my 4th graders to come home and have their little snack and be watching on television when they get home from school. I don't want to have to explain that to a fourth grader why they're advertising this and their rockets going off in the background as part of their advertising. But this whole idea of anything being sacred anymore, anything being sacrosanct, or anything being private, that's all been destroyed. Then he said there would be a loss of respect for women. You know, that was the days when everybody was burning their bra, and we have women's lib and everything's going to be great, and women now in the workforce, and we're going to force them to pay us as much as they pay men and everything like that. First of all, I have no problem seeing a woman as capable as a man in any aspect of the world, abilities, knowledge, or anything like that. That's not the issue. But I got news for you, that only women can provide for children. First of all, the gift of life in cooperation with their husband. And secondly, that nurturing that comes with the mother and child is very special. And as loving or as good as we may be as fathers, we'll never be able to provide for a child what a woman provides. But the amount of battery, the amount of abuse in the home on women and on children. I mean, every community has these battered women's shelters where everyone's scared. They bring these women, they bring these children. The other thing is this loss of respect. You know, I had to work hard for pornography. I had 3 older brothers, so I had to climb all the way up to the top of the closet to find their Playboy magazines. Nowadays, over $40 billion a year in the pornography industry. And we can do it right here in our home, okay? All you got to do is click on the computer. But do you really believe that pornography adds to the respect of women? That we see women as precious and made in the image and likeness of God, same as Mary, the mother of God, and ought to be respected and cared for and cherished? Do you really think we see women that way? Pornography doesn't promote that. They're no one's daughter. They're no one's sister. They're not a child of God. We don't look at pornography and say, I wonder whether or not they've made their confirmation. We look at them as something that can secondarily give us pleasure. A loss of respect for women. And 95% of all pornography is geared towards men, be it heterosexual or homosexual. The women don't have a pornographic market. Women have Danielle Steele novels, okay? They're emotional, men are visual. The whole idea is that we're catering towards a notion of a woman that the only thing she's good for is to give me pleasure. How sad, how destructive is that? And that notion of a woman being only good for a man's pleasure, which is what pornography promotes, has far-reaching consequences throughout our society. And I've got to stop here because we have to take a break, and I want to go further with this thought. But we'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us. Thank you for joining us here at Closer Walk Catholic Communications. More than ever, we feel that there's a great need to offer an alternative voice to mainstream media. Oftentimes, the voices that we hear and the lessons that we learn and the morals of the story are immoral at best. The need for us to offer the gospel message with great clarity and great charity is greater than ever in today's society. So we thank you. We thank you for all the support you give us here. First of all, we need your prayerful support, because without the gift of prayer, we do nothing. Without the gift of the Holy Spirit and God's grace, we do nothing. Secondly, we're donor-driven. We need your support. We need your prayerful support. We need your financial support. Everything that you do for us, all money goes towards spreading the gospel message. Thank you for all that you do, and God bless you and keep you always. Hello, and welcome back to Closer Walk Catholic Communications. I'm Father By, your host. And as I said in the first segment, we're doing things a little bit different. We're talking about the changing climate in our society and how it affects the dignity of the human person and what it means. I just gone through the second prediction of Pope Paul VI that would come if we ignored the teachings of Humanae Vitae, and that was a loss of respect for women. And I was talking about the pornography industry. Then the third thing is he said there would be an abuse of power. What does he mean by that? Well, now that we can control what we want, then we can start to force it and legislate it. You may or may not know this, but the mother, the foundress, the godmother of artificial contraception was a lady by the name of Margaret Mead, who met with Joseph Mengele, who was Adolf Hitler's primary physician who did all the experimentations on creating the great race. And the reason for artificial contraception was Margaret Mead thought that there were too many blacks, too many Catholics, too many Jews, and too many Slavs being born in this country. And if we can limit their birth, we can maintain our white Anglo-Saxon Protestant superiority. But if you let these blacks, Catholics, Jews, and Slavs keep breeding, they're going to one day take us over. That was the whole purpose for it. Well, you know what? And you know, worldwide, we've become a contraceptive society. Everyone in first world countries has embraced it as a really good thing. As a matter of fact, the HHS bill, which tries to tell us as Catholic employers we have to use or include artificial contraception in the RU486, the morning after pill, in our insurance. And China, the one-child limit policy, it's the abuse of power he was talking about. And places like Spain, places like Italy, places like France, they have a negative birth rate. There are more people dying than are being born, except for one group. In Europe, Muslims are outbreeding 6-1, and in this country, 6-2, Muslims are being born to other religions. Why? Because we think we're enlightened, and we don't need to have all these children. We want our boy, want our girl, want our tubal ligation, our vasectomy, and we can live the type of life that we want to live. So the idea of the abuse of power. Then, the fourth thing that he talked about was unlimited dominion. When mankind got to the point that they think they're in charge of the world and what happens, and it is no longer up to God to decide, we have the dominion, we have the power. And so what do we have? We have people who are now talking about euthanasia. Old people, they suffer. It costs too much money. Their care is just unreasonable. They shouldn't have to suffer. They shouldn't have to suffer. Man should make the decision, not God. And therefore, we think we can take the lives of our unborn. We can take the lives of our elderly. We're in charge. God's law does not govern what we do. Our convenience and our druthers is what governs how we legislate, and God's law is not part of that. Well, let me tell you, all of this undercuts a notion of the human person and it breaks them into three different categories. We see human life as a matter of pleasure, as a matter of profit, or as a matter of possession. Those three categories. Oh, aren't you getting a little dramatic here? Do you realize there's between 35 and 40 million active slaves in the world today? Do you know that? This human trafficking, we have more slaves today in the third millennium than we had in the 400 years combined of the African slave trade. 90% of them are sold into the sex trade. Right now, human trafficking of persons is the second largest moneymaker in the world behind the sale of arms, weapons. It used to be third behind the sale of illegal drugs. But you can only sell a drug once. You can sell a young child 3, 4, 5, 10 times a night. And we have 35 to 40 million slaves in the world today. And so that is the profit, that is the pleasure, that is the possession. We have organized traffickers. Oftentimes they're great mafia groups from all over the world, whether it be Chinese, whether it be Russian, whether it be Albanian. We have mafias who control the trafficking. When we have large sporting events, Super Bowl, the World Cup, the college playoffs, these people are trafficked in. It's an all-male environment usually. And so we want to entertain the troops, right? We're trafficking human beings. And so when you look at that, and this is the underbelly of society that no one really sees, but we don't look at people as human beings. Profit, pleasure, or possession. And so when we now have our young kids in high school, we'll have kids 14, 15, 16 years old addicted to pornography. That's become their idea of what, the gift of human sexuality is all about. How do you ever conceive that a child who is raised on that is going to one day be able to have a healthy, loving, life-giving, intimate relationship with another person? Can't be done. Not if that's their idea of human sexuality. You take it a little bit further. And I was a kid who played sports. And I was in the locker room, and I heard all the guys talking about this one, that one, and the other one. Oh, I'd love to jump her bones. Oh, she does this, she does that. And kids talk like that. And now we end up, we having things that we call friends with benefits, which simply means we are people who know each other, and we entertain each other with, sexual acts. That's how we do it. Friends with benefits. Or the great hookup culture. And all these different ideas devaluate. When you simply see someone, this is a person I get together with, and we do whatever sexually, that's not someone's daughter. That's not a child of God. That's not someone made in the image and likeness of God whose ultimate goal is to be in the presence of God for all eternity. They just become someone who gives me pleasure. And what's the problem? They want to do it. I want to do it. No one gets hurt. It's all okay. It's not just kids. How many people are now widows and widowers, and now they're going on cruises, they're going on trips, they're hanging out, they're hooking up with people, they don't want to get married, this, that, or the other. And now their grandchildren are saying that their grandparents are involved in these relationships with sleepovers, dating, going on cruises together, and we're talking to them about morality? Come on. And what about the parents who are nowadays thinking it's a good thing to give your high school senior daughter breast implants for graduation. They've been in an all-girls Catholic school for all these years. We're trying to teach them that they are important, that they're intelligent, and they're capable. And what do you give them for graduation? New breast, so that they can get the attention of more people who think they might be sexually attractive, who want to look at them with that same view of profit, pleasure, or possession. What's going on here? Our Holy Father, Pope Francis, has asked us to work to eradicate human trafficking by the year 2020. Hey, look, as long as there's a market, you're going to have it. The consumer's market. Until we start to change that basic, fundamental view of the dignity of the human person, until that changes, what's going to be next? Right now, the big taboo is kids. Are we going to lower the age of consent? Are we going to say that's okay? That's a lot in Mideast Asia. There's a lot of pedophile sex tourism. You can go all over the world. It's horrible. They sell these kids. Here in my own state, there are a lot of primary care traffickers. There are mothers who are addicted to drugs. They're fat and ugly. They can't afford the drugs. They've got a pretty 14-year-old daughter. The daughters are being trafficked. How are we going to do this? It goes back to that fundamental dignity of every human person. And Pope Paul VI was right. The abuse of power, unlimited dominion, the changing in the notion of woman. It's come back to roost. It's come back to haunt us. And we need to restore the dignity of every human person. Because until we see human beings as a gift from God, until we see them as made in the image and likeness of God, and not a matter of profit, pleasure, or possession, we're going to get worse. We have gotten worse. We are getting worse. We change it. We go back to God, and we let God change our hearts and minds. Our dignity is no less, but our vision is dimmed. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for putting up with this. I believe it wholeheartedly. May each day bring you closer in your walk with the Lord. God bless you.